Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm excited to be with you.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you today. I've been looking forward to speaking with you, so I'm so excited to have this chance. But will you start off with just telling listeners who you are and what your current roles are?
Yeah, so my name is Lindsi Walker, and I am originally from Louisiana. So if you hear an accent, that's why. My husband and I moved to Cincinnati for a little bit, and now we've lived on Long Island. Um, the years run together. It's been almost 14 years. So
Wow.
New York certainly feels more like home at this point, and I've certainly adjusted to the weather more. Um, and my husband and I serve as assistant pastors at Bethel United Pentecostal Church here on Long Island. And um, I also serve as the interim vice provost for global affairs at Stony Brook University, a public institution here on Long Island. And I have worked outside of the church uh, since graduating college, but then specifically here at Stony Brook, I've been here 12 of the 14 years that we've been on Long Island. So I get the advantage of kind of all of the different roles, and then most importantly, Jonathan and I have two kids, Quincy, who is 8 and thinks she's 13, and Graham, who is 4 and is counting down until he's 5 for whatever reason. That's the magic mark for him. So that's obviously the most fun and exciting and important role that I have, but it gives me the opportunity to wear lots of different hats.
Yeah, absolutely. So the transition into assistant pastor, that has been pretty recent, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we served as youth pastors the last 12 or so years,
Okay.
13 or whatever it is since we've been here. And then some of that started to transition throughout COVID. And then my husband was elected as assistant pastor just this year. So that official title has become certainly, it's a recent title.
Sure.
We still coordinate and oversee the youth as well. We have a really incredible team that we work with. But so that's certainly still an active part of our portfolio, and we're so passionate, about the students that we get to serve and work with as well.
Sure. So being at a university and then being in youth ministry for this extended period of time, it seems like you're kind of surrounded by that similar age group. Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I do. It's really great because I feel like my professional role gives me just some really great insight into what they're really dealing with and what I see, even on a personal level. And so I feel like it gives me just such a direct connection and an understanding of really kind of what's out there and what they're facing and certain trends and things that I feel and see. And then certainly just working with that age dynamic. Obviously, with my work, it's more on the young adult side,
Mhm.
but the way our student ministry is set up at our church is it extends really up through individuals in their mid 30s or so,
Okay.
and through young adult and early professional. So it's a really great connect point for me to kind of get to see both sides of that and how they're really so interconnected and kind of relate in a really personal way, because I find myself walking and living and working in similar environments as our young adults are.
Sure. I know for me, I've found, we were youth pastors and at the same time was working with a similar age group at work during that time as well. And I kind of found that it just kept me, like you're saying, connected to what's going on in that age group as a whole in the world. And then maybe a little more aware of what they're facing in the church at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So did you set out to be in education? What has that path looked like?
So it's an interesting question that you ask, and I would love to say that like I had this master plan and this is exactly what I thought I knew, and it all happened as planned. But as we know, for most of us, that's not exactly how it
Mhm.
happens. I when I was in college, I always thought I would be an attorney. That was the
Okay.
goal. That was the plan. Even in college, I took the LSATs. But then Jonathan and I started dating. Things got more serious. My plans changed. And when I moved to Cincinnati, was, I got a job there at an institution
Okay.
there, and I was admitted into an MBA program. And so that is really what started to kind of chart my professional path and course, in that I worked for the university. It was wonderful because it paid for my MBA program. And then really what at the time I didn't fully recognize was God orchestrating things years down the
Right.
road. Was I was given this opportunity to participate in something called the European Summer School of Advanced
Okay.
Management. And it was a summer program in Denmark as part of my MBA program. And honestly speaking, it was a year into marriage at the end of my program, but it was a scholarship program that I had applied for that I got accepted into. And selfishly speaking, it was paid for,
Okay.
and it took the place of my thesis.
It's in Denmark.
So we prayed. Right. So we certainly prayed about it, and I felt like this is a win-win,
Right.
right? It's free. It takes the place of my thesis. I mean, I had to do a really big project associated with it, but we both felt like this is what I should do. And little did I know that like that single experience is really what God was using to kind of set me up for the next phases of my
Mhm.
professional life. So then within really a year of that, we transitioned to Long
Okay.
Island. And my first job here on Long Island was because I had an international education
Mm.
experience. And then when I applied for my initial position here at Stony Brook, a requirement of that was international education or a study abroad or some type of experience like that. And so in the moment, I accepted it and I went because it just felt like, why
Sure.
wouldn't you do this? But it's just amazing to me how I see God as this
Sure.
master orchestrator, and we don't, and He plays chess, not checkers, right? So He's seeing like 3 or 4 moves ahead. Which, by the way, I don't
Mhm.
play
I
chess, so
can't
I'm
remember the
using an
role.
analogy that I don't necessarily even play. But God, like He sees these things so far in advance. So like what I saw in
Mhm.
2007 was just 2007, when God recognized that now in 2009 I'm going to place you in this position, and then in 2011 I'm going to place you in this position, and now I'm an interim vice provost for global affairs. And it really all started with something that God knew so
Yeah.
far in advance, that I didn't see or know. And in some ways that's a good thing, because had I known then where I would be now, it probably would have scared me half to death. But I encourage people to recognize that like God's in every one of those details, and the doors, and what we perceive as maybe small steps or small things can really just be stepping stones to really big things, in our lives, be that personally, in our families, professionally. And so I'm that testimony of where He really took what we thought at the time was a simple decision, and He used that really as a cornerstone for not just my professional work, but this has played so much into our
Mm.
ministry here on Long Island too, and equipping us to be able to minister in the way that we were. We knew when we moved to Long Island that I would have to have a job outside of the church. And so I see them so directly connected and tied, and not these two separate entities of like professional life, ministry life, but connected in that way. And God shows Himself because in that way, because He allowed all of these steps to be ordered in a way that it builds to where I am
Absolutely.
today.
And I love what you're saying of just he's in every detail, whether it feels like, is this God's will or is it not? It doesn't seem like that was really a question. Like, am I missing God's will by going on this experience, or is it even related? Is it relevant to what God has for my life? And it ended up being
Right,
just this moment that, snowballed into where you are now. I love
right,
that.
right, right.
So you
Absolutely,
have all these
absolutely.
different roles. In what ways, I know Long Island is very diverse as well. So in what ways have your just international experiences being in that office, how has that helped with the ministry piece of that, or just grown you as someone who's able to relate to people of all different backgrounds and walks?
Yeah, I'm telling you, that was so mind blowing to me when moving here. It was just amazing beyond just my profession. So I moved to Long Island. I'm just a
Sure.
girl from Southwest Louisiana, right? And people here say, "Where are you from?" And I say, "I'm from Louisiana." And they say, "No, like, where are you from? Where's your family from?" And it was just it was amazing to recognize that so many of our church and our peers and our friends, they associate with where their roots are from, whether it's Greek or Italian or Haitian or Dominican or wherever, somewhere in Africa or wherever it is. And so our church is so diverse of people from so many backgrounds and ethnicities, and it's just amazing to see, and the foods and the grocery stores, and it was just mind boggling to me. Like, I thought everyone used
Absolutely.
ranch dressing from the grocery store. And then I realized nobody here uses ranch
Yeah.
dressing, right? You have to make your own dressings, and, the foods and the shopping. And it's been so amazing. And then I have this professional world where I'm really working with so many different cultures and countries. And a significant portion of my job has been
Right.
immigration compliance and understanding visa policies and some intricate, kind of complicated things. And so really getting an understanding of that. And that's why I see it all as so connected, because I feel like God has given me this really unique opportunity to kind of grow in my understanding and my comprehension of what does that really
Great.
mean in terms of diversity and different backgrounds, and the countries that you're from, and what do those experiences look like for individuals that are very different than even my experiences. And so I just, it once again comes back to how there are these two separate worlds for me, so to speak, in terms of ministry and profession, and yet they come together in such a amazing way. To just really, my mind has been opened in the last 14 years of really just diversity and appreciating that and recognizing that it also brings challenges, right? So when you're bringing in lots of different cultures, lots of different thought patterns and backgrounds, and just what is norm for one is not norm for the other, can bring things that you really have to work through, both in a church setting as well as in a professional setting. But like I said, I think it's something that it makes me a better person. It makes me better in terms of ministry. It makes me better as a professional. And I really I genuinely mean this when I say I consider myself fortunate to have the ability to have, God gave me an opportunity to have such a broad scope and understanding. And obviously, I don't claim to be an expert in any of it, but just because of my professional dealings as well as within our church, it's going to be what heaven's like. And so I can't be anything but thankful to have that opportunity to have such a broad scope of experiences and
Yeah, that's
opportunities to
beautiful. And I
engage at
can
that
imagine
level.
it just enriches your life so much. I know for me, just when I've traveled, even and seeing different cultures and the way that they go about it, or learning their phrases sometimes has just opened my eyes to viewing something in a completely different way. And so being surrounded by that all the time, I can imagine just how enriching that is. But like you're saying, it changes you as a person and your outlook, and then that impacts every little area of your life because of the way that you've grown, even if it's just at
Absolutely.
your profession or just at church, or just it doesn't stay in that little box. So
Right.
cool. So
Absolutely.
as you've
Yes,
gone,
absolutely. And I love that my kids grow up in that, right? So this is normal for them now. So like they're engaging, and they have Haitians, Dominicans, Jamaicans, Italians, and they all call them aunt
yeah,
and uncle, and I love that for my kids, that this is norm for them, and this is their environment that they get to grow up in. And I think they're richer for it. And like I said, it's what we're all going to get to enjoy in heaven one day. And so I think we're just really fortunate to be able to kind of live in that and experience that. And for my kids as well, I think it's just it's something that they don't even know to fully appreciate right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely.
But one
So
day
as
they will.
you're, full-time mom, full-time at your job, and really and heavily involved in ministry as well. So as you've walked that journey, how have you kept all of these different things going and taking care of yourself at the same time?
Yeah, so this is something that I think we all deal with and kind of struggle with, even maybe through seasons of our life. And it was probably during COVID at some point when I did a lesson. I think it was even for our church that was shared online during like the lockdown season or whatever. Um, but I God really helped me because I found myself struggling with navigating all of the different roles of my professional job can be quite demanding at times. Um, and then being a mother, being in ministry, the dynamics of Long Island is that, people
Sure.
from our church can live 3 hours apart, in opposite directions. So there's traffic dynamics and connecting with people can be a lot more complicated than maybe in other parts of certain parts of the country. And I found myself struggling with this. And um, God really helped me to kind of redefine this idea of balance, because I felt like I was struggling to always think about, how do I balance this? How do I balance that? And so God really helped me to kind of redefine that and to say balance connotates this,
Mm.
that things are of equal weight or priority. And that's not the case for me in my life. And so it's not really about balancing it all, because it's not all equal. So it's more about determining, like, in this season and in this stretch of my life, what are my priorities? And then that becomes my focus, and that becomes the things that I must dedicate my time and attention and best efforts to. And then what are other things that, like, I'll try to, and then there's other things that just maybe aren't meant to be in this season for me right now. And so that has really helped me redefine for me the expectations, to feel like I have to have all of this of equal weight and priority and manage it all. And so it's more priority. So right now in this season of my life, my kids are 8 and 4. And so they're a major priority. I feel like we are in the formative years of their life, of really investing in them and disciplining them and training them and pouring into them and giving them a love for church and God and ministry. And yes, they're young, but this is the time to plant those seeds. So, like, that's a priority for me. Church and ministry will always be a priority for me. My job is something that I'm absolutely committed to, but maybe there's things like, there's some weekend events this weekend for my work that I was invited to. I made the choice to not participate in those, because I have to recognize, if I could, in the best case scenario, and we didn't have everything else going on, then yes, I should really be here and participate in those. But they're not required. They're not mandatory. It's not impacting anything directly. So I make those choices. But it's really about, for me, keeping my focus on what's the most important for me right now. And the most important for me right now is my children, my family, and then our ministry, and trying to navigate that and giving your best at what you can, and recognizing that each season will present itself in a little bit of a different way, and giving yourself grace for those moments and those seasons. I have to also say that I'm really fortunate that Jonathan is so good to me and helps in so many ways. And I'm probably more inclined to want to do everything and say yes to everything and be everything. And he really helps almost force some of that prioritization for me, in saying, no, you're not going to go here. I can do this and represent our family, and you're going to do this. And so I give him a lot of credit for really helping be that voice in my life and supporting me in that way, because I do have a full-time professional job, so that does force some decisions in different ways, for me personally. But I think it really is about understanding our priorities, not feeling the pressure of balancing it all, because in most cases, we probably can't balance all of it. So really understanding what are our priorities, focus your time and give your best efforts in those ways, and then allow God to kind of help you assess
Yeah.
the remaining
I
things
love how
and what you can
you
manage
are
and what you
almost
can't
taking the
manage.
pressure off of making a permanent decision. Reevaluating, okay, this is what my season looks like right now, and this is what is priority right now. It doesn't mean that it may always need to take so much of my time, or I may not have to say no to some things in the future. But right now, what is my priority, and how can I give the best version of myself to those priorities? And I love that because it doesn't feel so limiting to you as a
Right.
person forever. Does that make sense?
And even within, like, for individuals who are mothers, I think even then, like, it doesn't mean like for as long as I have kids, this is what I have to do. Not necessarily, right? When they're young, you may have flexibility in ways because you don't have homework, you don't have maybe school activities or events, but then you have other confining restrictions because they're younger. Whereas right now, my kids are 4 and 8, they still need a lot of like attention and hands-on. But once they're 12 and 16, then that's a different season of parenthood. So I think even within, like, recognizing those differences and embracing them and understanding that it's a season, and always keeping at the forefront of our minds, like, what's our priorities, what really is the most important for me at this season and this moment of my life, and then making those decisions based off of like a
Yeah,
really clear
absolutely. As
understanding of
someone who's in
what's the
the
priority
very
for
little
you and your
kid
family.
season, I completely understand what you are saying. And I haven't experienced that next season with my kids, but it does. It helps me to kind of section it out of, okay, this is what my life looks like right now. And it's okay that I'm saying no to some things that maybe they are a part of me, or maybe they fill a part of me. Maybe there's a creative outlet that I'm having to say no to right now. And it doesn't mean that it's forever, or that, this is a permanent change in me. And that's been very helpful for me. But what you're saying of just taking this idea of having to balance everything, because they aren't all equal. There are some things that I can say no to right now, and knowing that I can go
Right.
pick it up in its right
Right.
season, but also that God will make a way for that to come back around in the right season,
Right.
and it will be perfect when it does. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it was
Absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
the perfect timing as well, coming out of this pandemic with everyone having to kind of reevaluate. I think we were all surviving there for a while and just doing what we needed to, whether people were home with their kids and working at the same time. What did that look like for you that season? I know universities, a lot of them shut down. So what was your experience there with work and home and ministry and all of that?
Yeah, it was uh, I mean, it's just like another world. And obviously New York was most, significantly impacted early on in the pandemic. So it hit us in a very different way. And also in that it was very real and fresh for so many people, in that they had family members or loved ones who were really severely impacted by COVID, or even loss of life. And so it was just such a different perspective for us here in New York, and in Long Island, and how it impacted people. So that in itself was really different. I have so many family and friends from around different parts of the country, and in talking to them, that's what you recognize. Like,
Sure.
our experience of what that lockdown looked like was so different, because it really was. Our hospitals were overwhelmed. Here on the campus that I'm in,
Mhm.
we had two huge temporary hospitals built on our football field. So I mean, it was just a dynamic that I never could have even imagined.
Right.
And then my world is global, right? And dealing with that. So COVID for me started impacting my life, so to speak, in January of 2020, before
Wow.
anyone really thought that much about it, because we had Chinese students who were stuck in Wuhan, unable to get back to campus for the start of the semester. Then I was actually on a trip in California when I started getting calls saying, it's this virus that we're hearing about is now in Italy, and we have students studying abroad in Italy, and what are we going to do? And the governor's office was reaching out. And so then I get back in February, and then by March, everything is just has just completely gone. It's just crazy, right? With what's going on. New York shut down on March 17th, but my teams, we were here and we were working in person, and we were facilitating thousands of international students who were trying to get the right immigration documents and paperwork to get back home. And looking back, it's a miracle that none of my team members really were seriously ill or experienced anything more than they did, just considering the exposure and dynamics and what we were working with. We did go remote after that. But it was really only until about June. And then in terms of working, and then I've been back, physically in the office and working a few days a week at first, and then it's gradually geared back up. But we were fully online and remote for the spring 2020 semester. Then things started to ease back in fall 20, spring 21. And now we're pretty much fully back in person. All of my units and teams are back here in person, and things feel relatively normal. We still here on our campus have to wear masks indoors when you're outside of your private offices and things. But it was just so interesting and working from home. And when I went to work from home, it was like in the middle of a crisis where we have students who were trying to get back, and we had students stuck abroad and trying to get in. So it was almost like working 20 hours a week. And our governor at the time was issuing all kinds of edicts and proclamations and things. And, we would hear about them at 9 o'clock at night, and I would be calling my director saying, okay, what are we going to do now? And it was almost like you were constantly on call. And then my daughter was being schooled from home.
Right.
So try a first grader accessing and using Google Classroom by herself, which doesn't happen well. So speaking of finding that priority, by like May, I said, you know what, you're in first grade, and our schools go through June. So we still had like almost 2 months left. I was like, we're going to get by with like the bare necessity of what you absolutely have to do, and the rest of it, like, we'll figure it out as we go along, because I just couldn't manage it all, right? You have to choose. And I figure she's in first grade. The stakes aren't that high. We can figure it out. And then from the church aspect, right, I think she's fine by now. We're in third grade. We made it somehow. But then from the church dynamic, so we went, our church leadership team had a meeting before everything went remote and online and quarantined and lockdown, and said, okay, here's like plan A, plan B, plan C. And by the end of the week, like all of the plans were out, and we were in full lockdown. You couldn't have more than 10 people in the building, and they were checking on us. So it was very active in terms of New York. So it was so bizarre. Jonathan would go and record sermons to an empty sanctuary. We were immediately doing youth forums and everything online and through Zoom. And at that point, we were all kind of figuring out what this looked like. So it was so bizarre. And even still now looking back on it, I don't think any of us could have ever dreamed, what we went through. But I do think it's made us better. It's forced us out of our boxes in some ways. It's allowed us to be creative in ways that we previously maybe didn't feel the pressure to. From a work perspective, it's made us all really, we do things better now because of what we were kind of forced into, and kind of learning some of these things.
Probably more than we
my
do.
kids know all about Zoom and virtual backgrounds and the dynamics of all of that. So yeah, absolutely. The problem is then when I log in from home on my laptop, and I have like the psychedelic background as I'm getting on like an important work meeting or something. But it was so bizarre. And like I said, it was uniquely challenging because we had so many people who were really directly affected with loss of loved ones, and the nature of the health aspect of it. And still, even now, New York is kind of unique in some of our remaining restrictions and where we stand. But the church has come out, and where there's just such deep moves of God. And I think the people who are committed are even more deeply committed Certainly, there's been some element of loss through this, but some of that is also biblical, right? The Bible talks about those things, and so we're experiencing some of that where um, people who aren't firmly rooted can easily, at times drift away, but ultimately you see just the goodness of God and his faithfulness through all of it. I mean, I'm fortunate even in my profession in that my job is stable. And so there's just so many things that
Yeah,
that we
absolutely. And I
have to
think
be
it
thankful for and that we've
can
learned
connect
through
us
the
to
experience
all
that
of these
I
other
think
people
makes
with
us
all of
better.
these different perspectives and experiences as well, because you were in a situation where you could see how each of these students, their home countries, were handling it differently, and they were individually having to jump through all these hoops. And I can imagine it was eye opening, and also just kind of perspective shifting to see all of those different experiences.
Yeah, it really has. It like I said, it goes back to it just gives me such a diverse perspective to recognize both our students who are
Yeah.
abroad, some of whom were eager to get back and wanted to get back right away, and others said like I'm fine here, like I don't have any desire to come back right away. And then our students here and what that was like, and even some of them who made the choice to stay now, they're looking at almost like 2 years of being disconnected from their family. So understanding that dynamic is just it's a perspective that I get because of my position, but it really there's so many layers to this, and as you said, like we all experience things in different ways, and so I get to see how so many people have really experienced this pandemic in such different, equally important, in some ways tragic, in some ways complicated ways, but how it's affected so many people in such different ways, and how yet together, we can if we choose to, we can come together and be stronger, from that. But it really has my perspective is so broad in terms of just what I've seen and experienced from the work side of it, and certainly from the intricacies of visas and travel and restrictions and policies. And still, even right now, these things are changing. And so, just part of getting on this call, I'm sending emails out to different people on campus saying these updated guidance is coming out in the next few weeks, and how this is going to impact policy here on our campus. And it certainly has kept me on my toes for sure in the last 2 years.
Absolutely. So, in your role, you're working with students. What is your position as far as working with people on campus, working on people outside of campus? What does that entail for you?
So within my unit, I'm the interim vice provost for global affairs. So I oversee about 5 units that fall within global affairs, and so we do everything from English language training for non-native speakers. We have a global initiatives department where we're constantly thinking of new ideas and programs. We have a visa and immigration services unit, and that really is the immigration compliance both for us as an institution as well as for our international students, faculty, and scholars. So we service the wide scope of that. We also have a hospital connected to our campus, so we service all of the immigration document processing for the hospital and the dental school as well. We have the study abroad office, and so that obviously has been severely impacted. And we were just this week given approval by the New York governor to start some limited reopening of study abroad effective spring 2022. So we have a decent amount of units that fall under my purview. And so at this point in this stage of my career, it's really managing those units, those senior leaders within those units. I don't have as much direct contact with the student population. I tend to have
Sure.
more contact with the senior leaders on our campus, faculty members, working more directly with faculty members here, and then certainly have a lot of connections globally with partner universities all around the world, and where we have this partnership. So like right now, we're looking to re-engage in about 16 to 20 locations for spring 2022. So I'm reaching out to those colleagues at those universities around the world to make sure that kind of we're prepared for a safe reopening of what that looks like for our global engagement. In a pre-COVID world, that meant some international travel, which was nice. I mean, it wasn't a requirement, but it was an opportunity. Obviously, that hasn't happened since
Sure.
2019. But I started out, my role was direct engagement with students, and that was
Okay.
for several years. And then now in more recent years, it has shifted. But certainly, I still get that involvement. It usually is if it escalates to being major problems or issues or things like that. Um, but
They don't
like
want that involvement if they get
yeah,
it.
but it's
That's
still,
funny.
I'm still so connected to them. And we recently had a recruitment event, and so it's always fun. Like I don't go to them as much, but when I get to go out, and then it's like immediately you step back into that role and you remember your same spiel that you used to always give and what you're doing, and so those things are really nice to stay connected to, so that I'm familiar with kind of what's going on in each of the areas within the Office of Global Affairs. And like I said, it really keeps me connected from a ministry standpoint too, of kind of who we're dealing with and what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis on the campuses.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a certain part of your job that fills you more than others? If you had to pick just a favorite or something that you really enjoy, what would that be?
I think it's the people that I get to work with and the people from all
Mhm.
around the world. And so it just, even in seasons like this with COVID, I think it's so easy to read and to see news and media and to feel like there's so many differences. And I think
True.
I get such an awesome up close opportunity to see that, like, what connects us is so much more than what separates us. And
Yeah.
and I get to see that from working with colleagues in Korea and Italy and Chile and various parts of Africa, and our colleagues in Kenya and Madagascar and Tanzania, and so these opportunities, um, I guess it just renews like the hope that you have, that at the end of the day, there's so much more that connects us, and being able to work together. And I see that in our church as well. So many diverse cultures, so many diverse backgrounds. And yet at the end of the day, when you have that undergirding of the Spirit to
Mhm.
guide you, um, what connects us is so much greater and so much more powerful than, I feel like we're always being reminded of, like, our differences and how some
Sure.
believe this way and some believe that way. And we could name all the things, like
Especially
almost
in
everything, I
today's
feel
world.
like
Yes.
is the differences. And so I think that's what I love the most, is even now I work in a very liberal university setting and
Mhm.
environment. And I, I don't know if it's just like God has blessed me specifically, but like even the people that I work with, there's so much more that connects us and gives us an opportunity, like through this season, for me to have the opportunity to share with them more about like my foundation and my belief system, because
Yeah.
now they've been able to kind of see me live through this in the same way in the last few years. And it's just so encouraging to know that no matter the setting, no matter kind of even geographically where we are, like, there's commonalities that we can find, and from a spiritual perspective we can use those then to like lead and open the path and open the doorway to have these conversations that can have such bigger eternal impacts than even just casual conversations with your colleagues. But so I think that's what I love the most. I work with really great people both here on the campus, with students that we see, with institutions from all around the world. And it's just so refreshing to feel like you have that commonality and professional connection that exists beyond what you're seeing or hearing or reading in the media. that like I know what I live, and so to
Mhm.
me that's a much more valued experience than what I'm reading about, and how that
Sure.
exists. And so
Mm.
I think that's what I love the most. I love the ability to really stay connected, in a way of kind of what's going on and where things are headed, because I feel like that gives me good balance and perspective from a ministry standpoint. And then certainly, as I mentioned, pre-COVID, it was never a bad thing to have to go to Australia or New Zealand or France or in any of the locations that I've had to visit. So it's certainly a perk of the job
Yeah.
as well. I mean, there's a lot more to it. Even though I feel like God is he's just amazing in that I wanted to be an attorney, right? That's what I thought I wanted to be most of my growing up years and even through the first few years of college. And now a significant portion of my job is related to regulatory compliance and understanding laws and policies and implementing that on our campus. And so, in this really unique way, it's like God said, okay, that's not the plan I had for you, but I'm still going to let you be so intricately involved in reading and understanding laws and policies, and now taking it to the next level and implementing it on a campus of Stony Brook. We have 26,000 students. We're a top 64 institution in the United States in terms of research. So I think, God has a really great sense of humor of kind of making it all kind of work towards our good, as long as we're willing to really trust him. And that's like easy for me to say, and it's a lot harder for us to actually live, but to truly trust him with each of those steps and each of those details, of our life.
Absolutely. Thank you for just sharing all of that wisdom that you've, gleaned from your journey and learned along the way. And I love what you're saying about just the commonality we all have. And I think it's been easy as of late to be so polarized and to be so entrenched in our camps and our views and our opinions, because that's kind of the way the world is going, is very polarizing, as we know. But that reminder of how we're all part of humanity at the core, and we were all created by the same creator, and to see that commonality between us and keep that at the forefront.
And I think it's such an opportunity for the church, to really shine brighter, to be able to have unity and to be able to have like common purpose in this season. And I think for me, that's something that has been such a great witnessing tool over the last 18 or so months, is for my colleagues and friends here at work to see that, and to be able to recognize that when you have this greater purpose, it can allow you to, it supersedes all of the other things. It doesn't mean that there's no one that has differences in the church. Clearly that's impossible, but you have something that's so much greater, so much, our purpose is higher. And I think it's just an opportunity for the church, so to speak, not the physical church, but the people, to be able to shine even brighter in a world that tends to be darker and darker. And I'll never forget when we were making the decision to come to Long Island, I remember praying and thinking, God, like, I'm just a little girl from Southwest Louisiana. Like, how can I resonate and speak to and
Sure.
minister to individuals from such a different
Yeah.
background? And I'll never forget really God kind of placing in my heart, my mind, the understanding that at the core, we're all seeking the same, right? Whether you're from a small town in Southwest Louisiana or whether you've grown up in Queens or Brooklyn in New York City, that we're seeking his love and his purpose and the drawing of the Spirit. And that's something that is a unifier among all of us, no matter where we are. And so that's how then God allowed me to be able to come here and find my own place and purpose, because what defines us isn't our surroundings or all of these other physical things, but it's something that's so much deeper in our desire to know God's love for us, and for them, for students or whomever you're dealing with, to feel his love through us. And can unify us in the midst of a world that seems to be more and more polarizing with every day and month that
Yeah. Oh,
passes.
so good. Yes. And just if that's the perspective that we're viewing the world through, it keeps just back to our conversation with balance, keeping the things that are important at the forefront. It does that in a different way for us of keeping the true things, the important things at the surface rather than these circumstances that we're all walking through or the individual circumstances that each of us has. Well,
Absolutely,
that is all
absolutely.
so beautiful. Thank you for sharing just all the different pieces of your journey with us. And I think it just gives all of us different perspective, knowing that we can hear all of the different roles that you've played and the people that you've gotten to interact with. And so I want to wrap up today by just asking you a question that we ask everybody. So it can be kind of a knee-jerk reaction, silly, serious, whatever comes to mind. So what is saving your life right now?
What is saving my life is, this is a good question, which I actually heard you ask someone else. I thought I should think about this. Uh, Saving my life is, I would have to say right now, what is saving my life is coffee. Even though I consider myself a casual drinker, so I'm not like a
Dependent.
major coffee drinker, but coffee saves my life. Um, and also just I think the hope for at least us here in New York that things are becoming
Yeah.
more normal, more stable. The in-person interactions
Yes.
are coming back because I'm thankful for technology and I'm thankful for the ability that we have with that. But there's nothing like those in-person
Absolutely.
connections. So so I would say between caffeine and between being able to connect with people more in person, which for us, maybe for other parts of the world, they've been back to
Sure.
that for a very long time. But for us here in New York, it's really just kind of, we're really gearing up into that, is just signs that there's hope, and that we're getting back to being able to kind of engage in ways that are meaningful and in person.
Absolutely. There's
So
nothing like it. There's nothing like that in-person hug or, just connection, being able to see someone. Yes.
I
Being able to
know,
talk to them. So
I know,
thank you so much for
I
this
know, I know.
conversation. I appreciate it so much. It was just a thrill to have you.
Thank you. I really do. I appreciate the opportunity because I think it's just so important for individuals to see
Yes.
others who are out there. And certainly when you talk about on these podcasts, it may sound easy, but I promise I have bad days and I have days where I feel like I don't manage anything well. And so while I'm talking to you about
Yes.
priorities, I struggle with it myself. But and so I don't say that from a point of being negative as much as
Yes.
a point to say we're all in this together, and we all kind of struggle and deal with similar things, but together, we can reach out to each other and be stronger together and give our best, and really do our best to make a difference in the circles that God's
Yes.
allowed us,
Just we
to
have
be a part
more
of.
that connects us than separates us. Perfect.
That's
All right.
right.
Well, thank
That's
you
right.
again, Lindsay. And we're just excited to have you.
Thank you.